Welcome to a reading of Echoes of the Abyss. Isle of the Drowned. Echoes of the Abyss. Isle of the Drowned. Part 1. The nomad's gambit cleaved through the obsidian waves like a dagger through flesh, its hull groaning under the weight of eternal curses. The year was lost to Captain Blue Tide. Time meant nothing to the undead. But the seas remembered him, whispering his name in the foam that lashed his skeletal form. Once known as Elias Thorn, a privateer of flesh and fury, he now stood at the helm as a spectre of bone and blue fire, his tricorn hat perched atop a skull that grinned eternally. His coat, a tattered navy blue relic from his living days, hung from ribs etched with the scars of 1,000 battles, gouges from cutlasses, burns from powder blasts, and the deep craters of cannon shot marred his frame. Yet he endured, bound by a betrayal that had birthed this hellish existence. At his side, ever vigilant, slunk Gambit, the faithful shadow. The hound's skeletal form was a twisted echo of the vicious Catahoula he had been in life. Ribs splintered from a fatal boot, jaw hanging crooked from the blade that had ended him, and empty sockets ablaze with the same ethereal blue flame that burned in Blue Tide's gaze. A heavy iron chain collar encircled his neck, links glowing faintly with spectral energy, the very chain that had once bound him in the hold during that fateful mutiny. Now it was a tether of undeath, unbreakable, symbolizing a loyalty that transcended the grave. Gambit pressed close to his master's leg, his bony tail twitching as he sniffed the salt-laden air, not for prey of flesh, but for the intangible sense of deceit and forgotten sins. The crew, a ragtag assembly of skeletal mariners, moved with mechanical precision across the deck. Their bones clicked like dice in a gambler's cup as they adjusted sails woven from the shrouds of the drowned. These were the damned souls who had followed Blue Tide in life or been conscripted in death. Mutineers, rivals, and unfortunates alike, all cursed to serve aboard the Gambit forever. No words passed between them. Only the hollow rattle of commands echoed in their minds, a psychic tether from their captain. Blue Tide's grip tightened on the wheel, phalanges scraping against weathered wood. A fragment of memory had surfaced in his fractured mind, pulling him toward this voyage. It came in dreams that weren't dreams, visions of a woman, her face blurred by time, her laughter echoing over crashing waves. Who was she? A lover from his mortal days, the key to his betrayal. The curse that bound him and Gambit to this endless raid had eroded much, but this pull was insistent, like a hook in his non-existent gut. The haunted island, whispered about in sailor lore as Isla de los Ahogados, the Isle of the Drowned, held a clue. Maps etched in blood on cursed parchment pointed there, a speck in the Caribbean, where ships vanished and ghosts wailed eternally. "Steady on, your bones!" Blue Tide rasped, his voice a gravelly echo that carried over the wind. The crew obeyed without question, for to defy him was to invite oblivion. Gambit growled low, a sound like grinding gravel, as if sensing the turmoil in his master's soul. The hound had always been attuned to Elias's moods, even in life. Back then, as a pup rescued from a wreck, Gambit had been his salvation from loneliness, trained to guard, to fight, to love unconditionally. The dog had saved him more times than he could count, and in death, that bond had only strengthened, forged in the fires of vengeance. The journey spanned days that blurred into nights, the nomad's Gambit propelled not just by wind, but by the curse's unholy momentum. Storms assailed them relentlessly, lightning forking across the sky like accusing fingers. One tempest in particular tested even their undead resilience. Waves towered like mountains, crashing over the deck and sweeping skeletal crewmen into the depths, only for them to claw their way back aboard, dripping with spectral brine. Bluetide laughed, a hollow, mirthless sound, as he lashed himself to the wheel. "Come at me, you watery bastards! I've drowned before, and it didn't stick!" Gambit huddled at his feet, jaws snapping at the foam as if it were an enemy. The hound's chain rattled with each heave of the ship, a constant reminder of their shared fate. In quieter moments between gales, Bluetide would kneel, his bony hand stroking the dog's skull. "Ye remember, don't ye, boy, the night they took us?" Gambit's blue eyes flared brighter, as if affirming. The memory replayed in Bluetide's mind. The mutiny led by Harlan Voss, the quartermaster's blade piercing Gambit's heart, Elias's own execution and plunge into the abyss. The Sea Witch's curse, or whatever dark entity had answered his rage, had resurrected them. But at what cost? Eternal slaughter, yes, but also this gnawing void, a past half forgotten. As the storms subsided, the island loomed on the horizon, a jagged silhouette wreathed in fog that pulsed with unnatural light. Isla de los Ahogados was no paradise. Its shores were littered with the wreckage of countless vessels, splintered hulls, rusted anchors, and the bleached bones of crews long perished. The air hummed with whispers, the voices of the drowned pleading for release or cursing the living. Bluetide felt a chill that pierced even his undead form. This place was a nexus of curses, a graveyard where the veil between life and death thinned to gossamer. "Drop anchor, you swabs!" he commanded. The Nomad's Gambit ground to a halt in the shallows, its keel scraping against submerged skeletons. Bluetide leaped overboard first, landing in knee-deep water that boiled with ethereal vapors. Gambit followed, splashing silently, his bony paws leaving no ripples. A detachment of crew, 10 skeletal warriors armed with cutlasses and pistols that fired ghostly shot, disembarked behind them, forming a ragged line. The beach was a macabre tapestry, sand mixed with bone fragments that crunched underfoot, driftwood twisted into shapes resembling screaming faces. As they pushed inland, the jungle enveloped them, a dense thicket of vines that writhed like serpents and trees with bark etched in runes of despair. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into words. "Betrayer, lover, blood on the tide." Blutide's blue eyes narrowed. "Quiet your yappin'," he muttered, but the voices persisted, tugging at the threads of his memory. Gambit led the way, nose to the ground, sniffing out paths unseen. The hound's instincts had sharpened in death. He could detect not just physical trails, but echoes of emotion. Fear, love, hatred. Suddenly he froze, hackles rising, though no fur remained, and let out a guttural growl. From the undergrowth erupted a swarm of wraiths, translucent spirits of drowned sailors, their forms bloated and decayed, eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. They wielded spectral weapons, harpoons, boarding axes, and chains that whipped through the air like lashes. "Ambush!" Bluetide bellowed, drawing his cutlass, a blade forged from the iron of his own execution chains, enchanted to cleave both flesh and spirit. The first wraith lunged at him, its harpoon aimed for his skull. He parried with a clash that sparked blue fire, then countered with a sweeping arc that bisected the ghost, dissolving it in a wail of agony. Gambit pounced on another, jaws clamping around its ethereal leg, tearing it apart in a burst of ectoplasmic mist. The hound's bites burned cold, searing the spirit's essence and banishing them to true oblivion. The crew joined the fray, bones clattering as they hacked and slashed. One skeleton lost an arm to a wraith's axe, but fought on, using the severed limb as a club. Bluetide moved like a whirlwind, his coat flapping, as he dispatched 3 spirits in quick succession. A particularly vicious wraith, a bloated captain with a noose around its neck, grappled with him, claws raking across his ribs and leaving fresh gouges. "Ye think ye can end me?" Bluetide snarled, head-butting the ghost with his skull, then driving his blade through its heart. It exploded in a shower of ghostly ichor. The battle took its toll. 2 crewmen were overwhelmed, their bones scattered, and souls absorbed into the island's curse, strengthening it. Gambit, ever protective, dragged a wraith off Bluetide's back, shaking it like a rat until it dissipated. The hound's chain whipped through the air, an extension of his fury, lashing at foes. As the last spirit faded, Bluetide surveyed the carnage. "Loyal as ever, boy," he said, patting Gambit's head. The dog whined softly, pressing against him, its blue flames dimming in momentary respite. Deeper they pressed, the jungle thickening into a labyrinth of thorns that snagged at bone and cloth. Vines bled black sap when cut, staining the ground like ink from a devil's quill. Gambit growled warnings at hidden pitfalls, quicksand pits filled with skeletal hands that grasped at ankles, or illusory paths leading to chasms echoing with eternal falls. Bluetide's mind raced with fragments, a woman's face, smiling under a Caribbean sun, a whispered promise, a dagger in the dark. Was she the reason for his betrayal? Had Voss acted not just for gold, but for jealousy? A clearing emerged, ringed by totems fashioned from whalebone and rusted chains, each adorned with skulls that seemed to watch their approach. At its center stood a mound, overgrown with moss that pulsed like a heartbeat. Gambit circled it warily, whining, a sound laced with recognition. The air grew heavy, the whispers coalescing into a chorus. "Remember, the blood, the lock." Bluetide knelt, his phalanges digging into the earth. Soil gave way to reveal an iron-bound chest, crusted with barnacles and old gore, as if dredged from the sea floor. With a creak of rusted hinges, he pried it open. Inside, nestled on decayed velvet, lay the object of their quest. An old silver locket, tarnished by centuries, its surface etched with intricate filigree that resembled crashing waves. Bluetide's bony fingers trembled as he lifted it, the chain dangling like a noose. Opening the locket revealed a faded portrait, a miniature painting of a woman, her features softened by time and exposure. Dark hair framed a face of striking beauty, eyes that once sparkled, now dulled to sepia tones. Wrapped around the portrait was a lock of hair, the same dark shade, bound with a frayed ribbon. Dried blood encrusted it all, flaking like rust as he touched it. Blood from a wound, perhaps, or a ritual seal. The scent hit Gambit first. The hound sniffed, then backed away with a whimper, as if the blood carried the essence of betrayal. Memories flooded Bluetide like a tidal wave. Her name, Isabella. His betrothed in life, a merchant's daughter with a spirit as fierce as the sea. They had planned to wed after one last raid, but Voss, Harlan Voss, her secret admirer, had coveted her. The mutiny wasn't just for gold. It was to claim Isabella, to erase Elias from the picture. The parchment in the locket's hidden compartment confirmed it. Faded ink scrawled, "The tide turns on the betrayer twice. Isabella's blood seals the pact. Bluetide's blue flames roared brighter, rage igniting anew. Isabella hadn't survived. Voss had killed her too, or perhaps she had taken her own life in grief. This locket was her final message, buried here by some unknown hand, perhaps a loyal crewman who escaped the mutiny. The island's curse had preserved it, waiting for him to reclaim this piece of his shattered past. But the revelation stirred the island's wrath. The ground trembled, and from the totems erupted a horde of feral wraiths, half-rotted corpses animated by malice, their forms a grotesque fusion of flesh and bone. They shambled forward, moaning accusations. "Betrayer! Murderer!" Bluetide rose, cutlass in hand, the locket clutched in the other. "Ye want blood! Come take it!" The battle was ferocious. Gambit charged first, tearing into the nearest wraith, its jaws crunching through decayed limbs. Bluetide hacked relentlessly, his strikes fueled by fresh fury. One wraith, a skeletal figure resembling Voss, grappled with him, its claws digging into his coat. "Ye took everything!" Bluetide roared, decapitating it with a savage swing. The crew formed a defensive ring, pistols blazing ghostly fire that incinerated foes. Gambit proved invaluable, darting between legs, hamstringing the undead horrors, when a massive wraith, a bloated giant with chains for arms, swung at Bluetide. The hound leaped onto its back, gnawing at its neck until it collapsed. The hound took wounds too. A claw raked across his ribs, splintering bone further. Yet he fought on, loyalty unyielding. As the last wraith fell, the island quieted, the whispers fading to a murmur. Bluetide pocketed the locket, its weight an anchor on his soul. "We've found our clue, boy," he said to Gambit, who nuzzled his leg. But clues brought questions. Was there a way to break the curse, to avenge Isabella fully? The past was a storm, and they were forever in its eye. They returned to the Gambit under a blood moon, the ship setting sail into the endless night. Bluetide stood at the helm, locket in hand, Gambit at his heel. The bond between them, forged in life and sealed in death, endured. And as the waves carried them onward, the hunt continued, for vengeance, for answers, for whatever scraps of peace the damned could claim.